Hello and welcome to this video on disability issues in sport, again aimed at AQA AS PE syllabus. Now, you are definitely going to get a question on the exam, the AQA exam, to do with barriers to participation. You're given one of four groups. You're given disability groups, ethnic minority groups, women or female groups, and low social class, low income groups. So what we're going to look at in this video are the disability issues in sport. In other words, why don't as many disabled people take part in physical activity on a regular basis in comparison to non-disabled people? So it's a question of equal opportunities. There aren't equal opportunities out there for these four target groups: disability, ethnic minorities, women and low social income or low social class, and we're going to explore what those barriers are. But here's the crucial bit. The question that often comes up on this is a discuss question, which means we've got to give arguments or reasons for and against. But let's go right to basics first, and let's look at the disability issues in sport, and let's look at the barriers. So you've got a picture there of David Weir, one of our most famous Paralympic athletes, multiple gold medal winner. So what barriers has he potentially faced or has faced and had to overcome in his life in order to make it, and what are the problems still out there for disabled children who want to follow him and try and achieve what he's achieved? Well, one of the biggest things that we talk about, and I'm just going to put them down here as a kind of like a little mind cloud, is there's an access issue. What I mean by that is there are a lot of facilities, sports facilities out there, but do they all have disabled access? Do they all have use of facilities in there as well? And you'll often find that access and facilities appear on the same line in the mark scheme. So you are not going to get a mark for saying access is a problem for disabled people and there is a lack of disabled facilities. They're part of the same line in the mark scheme. So you're only going to get one mark for that. There is also an issue, is that we have, with that lack of access and facilities, we have a lack of local clubs. Now, you just think about that yourselves. How many local sports clubs that, train during the week, play on a Saturday and Sunday, do you know in your location? And how many of them are for disabled people? I bet you're going to struggle to name one. Some of you probably, well, a lot of you aren't going to be able to name any. So we've got a lack of local clubs. And don't forget, local clubs actually are grassroots. If you're not getting children into grassroots sport, then you're not going to get elite athletes coming out the top end. So they're not going to be able to follow in David Weir's footsteps. So that's another big problem that we've got there. As well as a lack of local clubs, we have a lack of specialist coaches. Okay, it sounds a bit daft, but you do need to be very well qualified and a lot of experience to work with disabled people. You will have people who coach athletes in the shot put. Well, what happens if someone comes up to them who's in a wheelchair and doesn't have the use of their legs? All of their shot put coaching qualifications will have taught them about how to drive across the circle, how to generate huge forces in the quadriceps, the hamstrings, the glutes, and how to then transfer that into the upper body and the arm to get the greatest, distance on the shot. Well, what if you can't use your legs? You need specialist coaching to work with those people, to coach them appropriate techniques. So there's an issue there with the lack of clubs and also the lack of coaches working at these clubs. Now there's some real gimmies here. And when I say gimmies is, if you think about these, no matter which, I know we're looking at disability issues in sport, disabled people, but no matter which group you get, ethnic minorities, disabled, women or low social class, these are answers that you can give for any of them. I'm just going to write them down the left-hand side here. What do all of these groups, but disabled in particular, have in common? They have low self-esteem. In old money, low self-confidence. Okay? Disabled people make up a small percentage of the country, so chances are this child in a wheelchair or this amputee or this a child who's blind or something like that, chances are they're the only ones in their family and in their family social group who have that condition. So there's an immediate low self-esteem, low self-confidence. I don't feel like I'm capable. I can't do what everyone else can do. So low self-esteem is often a common barrier to physical activity. Also with that, I know it's a bit daft with his picture up here, but we do have a lack of role models. How many disabled athletes can you name in comparison to non-disabled? You know, it's probably 20 to 1, 30 to 1, 40 to 1, something like that across all sports. So, you know, we do have a lack of role models. And I'm just going to draw a line and an arrow coming across here, because this is sometimes worth a separate mark on the mark scheme, but it's very often on the same line as a lack of role models. Where do we get our role models from? We get them from TV, radio, newspapers. So a lack of media coverage is, oops, that's not very good, is a big problem. Lack of media coverage is a big problem for, you know, disabled people in this country. Paralympics 2012 was absolutely incredible, unbelievable. But how many times have you seen disability sport on TV since then? Or in the newspapers? Or heard it on the radio? It's not a lot, nowhere near as much as non-disabled sport. So they are a lot of the key barriers to regular participation in physical activity for disabled people. Now, where do we go from here? If you're asked the question on what are the barriers, it's simple, that's them there. Okay, you've got them in front of you now. This way you've got to read the question very, very carefully. If it's just what are the barriers, you identify them and you say their impact. If you get a question that's saying discuss, which is the word that we mentioned earlier, okay? So if we're thinking about the discuss side of it, and if I just write discuss at the top here, and then in brackets put this, points for and against. Now that's what discuss means. Let's say you were to get a question that says, discuss whether the London 2012 Paralympics has increased participation for disabled people in the UK. The first word in that question was discuss. So you've got to give arguments for and against, i.e., yes, it has increased participation, but no, it hasn't done enough. It still hasn't reversed the pattern of fewer disabled people take part in regular physical activity in comparison with non-disabled people. So what are the barriers that are out there? Well, do you know what? It's a carbon copy of what we've just written there. Very often, just very quickly, the discuss questions are often 5 to 6 marks. Okay, so if it's a 5 to 6, if it's 6 marks and it's a discuss question, dead easy. 3 marks that say there are still barriers and it's still a problem and there's still reduced participation, but then 3 marks that says, however, it's improving, it's increasing because, okay? If it's 5 marks, it's just a 3 and a 2 split in whichever way you feel your answer is strongest. So it could be 3 ways that there are still barriers and 2 ways that we're overcoming them, or vice versa. 2 ways that there are still barriers and 3 ways in which we're overcoming them. Let's take it that we are going to answer a nice and steady one that is a 6. Okay, so we're just going to look at the 6 marks here. So let's do a 3 and a 3. Why are there still barriers? Well, despite the successes of London 2012, we still have a lack of clubs. There's a problem. Despite the successes of London 2012 in the Paralympics, we still have a lack of specialist coaches. Okay, we still have a lack of access or facilities, as we've mentioned all on the previous slide. And finally, we've got that issue of reduced or low self-esteem and reduced media coverage, which leads to that fewer number of role models. Excuse my writing, it's appalling, I know. Okay, now if you've got, as we've got there, a 5 to 6 mark question and it's discuss, so there are our arguments against the successes of London 2012 Paralympics. We've still got a lack of clubs, we've still got a lack of specialist coaches, lack of access and facilities, low self-esteem, low media coverage. Any 3 of those, and you're picking up 3 of your 5 or 6 marks. However, we can't knock London 2012 Paralympics. It did a great deal of positive stuff for disabled people in this country. So what has happened as a result, and again remember, it could be a 5 or 6 mark question. This is the opposite. In the discuss question, this is now, it was a success, okay? Even though there is a lack of, we are now seeing, or we have seen, I'm just going to pick a different coloured pen, let's go for that one, okay? We have seen an increase in, whoops, I'm just going to pen right, an increase, start that one again, in access and facilities. It is improving, it's got better, okay? Despite the fact that there is still way more non-disabled sport on TV, we have seen an increase in media coverage. Leading to an increase in role models. You may have seen recent TV adverts about Rio 2016 and looking for more and more people to get involved in that. There have been adverts on Channel 4. On Channel 4 as well, over the course of the last couple of years, we've had the World Paralympic Athletics, sorry, not Paralympic, but World Disabled Athletics tournaments on there. We've also had a lot more media coverage, particularly on BBC Sport websites and things like that, of disabled success in recent swimming championships, Ellen Simmons and people like that. So we are seeing increased media coverage and increased role models, even though it's still nowhere near as much as non-disabled athletes and media coverage. Okay, we are seeing increased and improvements in technology. You know, carbon fibre limbs and you know, lighter wheelchairs and harnesses for athletes to use when they're doing, you know, I mentioned the disabled shot put earlier, harnesses that paralysed people can be strapped up in and then do the shot put from an upright position. You know, we're seeing a massive increase in the technological side of things. We're also seeing a big increase in funding and sponsorship, because now these two go hand in hand. As soon as something is on TV, it makes it commercial. Companies will want to sponsor it. They will want to put money in it because it advertises their brand, their logo, and they're associated with something that people are watching on TV and take pride in watching. So funding and sponsorship and media coverage go hand in hand, but they will be worth separate marks on the mark scheme. As well as that, we are also seeing an increase in the number of specialist coaches that are coming through. So, to summarise this little section up, you could get a question asking you about barriers to participation for disabled people. You've got to look at what the common barriers that disabled people face in this country, in the UK, to regular physical activity in sport, okay? What you've then got to do is read the question carefully. If it's a discuss question, you've got to then go, right, I've got to give arguments for and against. So I've got to say that, yes, there still is too little disabled participation in sport and physical activity in this country. However, things are improving. The key thing then is to look at the mark scheme, split the marks between those two arguments. If it's 6 marks, 3 arguments for, 3 arguments against, okay? I hope you found that useful. You know, watch this as many times as you need to. Recap the points, because these are all points taken from the mark schemes on the AQA papers.